This tiny little thing is a fully fledged optical spectrometer. Today, we are going to test the crap out of it, figure out how it works, and tear it down. We are even going to show you how to hack it, so you can unlock some additional features. Right, without further ado, let's get on with it. Don't panic, this is not one of those stupid unboxing videos. This is actually the second and final part of the video about this product. We wanted to wait for this product to be available on Amazon before releasing it. Well, now it is finally available to buy outside of mainland China. And we will discuss that more later in this video. If you want to watch the first part of this video, and learn how we ended up owning LEDs that have colors, with interesting names like Brothel Pink, the link is in the description below. Throughout this video, we are going to be comparing this tiny spectrometer with a super low-cost product called the Little Garden Spectrometer. Again, we have made a video about this particular product, and this is also linked in the description below. So, now we should explain what this device actually is, how it works, and why it uses quantum dot technology. The first thing that I want to make clear is that we purchased this product ourselves. This video is not sponsored by the manufacturer, and in fact they had no idea that we were planning to make a YouTube video about this product. The second thing to mention is that we did let the company know, once we received our device, because it didn't work and needed replacing. This itsy bitsy spectrometer is made by a Chinese technology startup, called Torchbearer. This company seems to have two key pieces of intellectual property. Firstly, they have developed an organic quantum dot technology, and they have figured out how to deposit these quantum dots precisely over the pixels of a CMOS image sensor. The second piece of technology they have developed is a spectral inversion algorithm. In this product, there are only 20 different quantum dot types. Without this algorithm, the product would have an absolutely terrible resolution of about 33 nanometers. With the algorithm in place, the product can achieve a resolution that is 6 times lower. The basic principle of how this device works is as follows. After the diffuser, light enters through a narrow optical slot, and is directed at a reflective grating. Above the diffraction grating is the CMOS image sensor, which has patches of quantum dots deposited upon its surface. At this point, the wavelengths are quantized into 20 discrete bins, and this is where the magic of the spectral inversion algorithm starts working on the data. The product has both a mobile application for Android and iOS, as well as a Windows PC application. They both work, but to be honest, they are both in need of some serious improvements. In their current form, the applications are pretty clunky with some very annoying issues. For example, the Windows application is not able to remember any of the settings, including which language to use or what COM port to connect with. You can't even adjust the window size or shape. But to be fair, these are small issues compared to my main gripe with the available applications. Whilst you can sort of export data, you can only export a PDF. Even though the software needed to export a CSV file could be done by a first-year software engineering student in about half a day, it wasn't included. So, I asked the company why this was, and they made the shocking revelation that they deliberately do not enable that feature on their cheaper products. That's not exactly going to make people feel good about buying the device, and frankly it is a complete and utter load of bollocks. For example, high-end test equipment companies, like Rode and Schwartz or Keysight, charge extra for some software upgrades. But in reality, many of those features took substantial investments in research and development, so they can justify it as recovering those costs. Perhaps, the company should focus on getting their software to work correctly, instead of finding ways to alienate their potential customers. I'm pretty certain that the lack of this basic feature is going to put off a lot of people from buying this device. Let's hope that they see the light and fix these problems. Let's take a look at the key specifications of this spectrometer and compare it to the little garden device that we have previously reviewed. First of all, we need to explain that almost all of the specifications listed for the little garden device were either obtained experimentally or derived from the datasheet of the camera module that is used in the product, so there is some uncertainty in some of the exact values. Looking at the spectral range, the little garden device certainly has a slightly wider wavelength range. The little garden device also wins out on the spectral resolution. It is better than the TLM2 by about a factor of 4. But the TLM2 device starts to outperform in terms of signal-to-noise ratio and dynamic range. However, the most important area where it has a major advantage over the little garden device is that it reports its luminosity in absolute units, which are in terms of power per unit area. This has been calibrated to be better than 3% accurate over the usable spectrum of the product. Enough of the small talk, let's put this thing through its paces and find out if this tiny spectrometer is actually useful. In part 1 of this video, we introduced some of the light sources that we want to test, using this tiny spectrometer. We didn't actually get very far through this long list of light sources before we ran out of time in the last video. Well, in part 2, we are going to get through all of these tests. We found some problems with the operation of this product. A few of these light sources didn't give the results we expected. We have a diverse and fairly interesting set of light sources, from the ultraviolet to the infrared. Some have continuous spectra and others emit discrete lines. So, let's use this spectrometer to take a look at our most fundamental and oldest light source, our nearest star, the Sun. Here in southern China, and during the monsoon season, cloudless days are a rare commodity.
Fucking hell.
But that doesn't mean that rainy days are boring. And it can't rain forever. Eventually, the sun poked its head out and we managed to capture a spectrum. As you can see, the supposedly continuous spectrum of the sun has had a lot of bites taken out of it. These are called Fraunhofer lines, and these absorption lines are the chemical fingerprint of both the sun and our own atmosphere. This wonderful piece of technology is a deuterium arc lamp. From the moment I saw this on Taobao, I just knew I had to own it. This light emitter is quite special. It emits a fairly continuous, ultraviolet spectrum. And this makes it useful for discovering the shortest wavelength that this spectrometer can measure. This tube takes a while to warm up before the arc is fired, and it requires a very special power supply. Almost immediately, we can see the characteristic deuterium spectrum appearing on the PC application. The deuterium lamp spectrum is easily identified by some of its key emission lines. The deuterium alpha and beta lines are clearly visible, as is the Fulcher band. Comparing to the little garden device, we can see some differences. Putting the resolution limitations to one side, there is clearly a significant difference between the shortest detectable wavelengths of these products. Whilst the TLM2 device does obviously detect some parts of the UV spectrum, it clearly cannot detect the same level of high-energy photons as the Little Garden DIY spectrometer. So now that we have defined the high-energy limits to this device, we need to look at the infrared end of the spectrum to understand where the longer wavelength limits lie. But before we do that, let's just enjoy this output from this heavy hydrogen emitter again, from the total safety of a camera view of the emitted radiation. Light sources don't get any more old school than the humble incandescent bulb. This should emit light as an almost perfect black body source. What the hell is this thing? Have we just discovered some new property of black body radiation? Perhaps this is the infrared catastrophe. But before we start working on a speech for the Nobel Prize Award ceremony, perhaps we should just check that this isn't some kind of bug. We will come back to this issue later in the video. The rest of the spectrum looks exactly how it should do. Hopefully this is just a silly bug in the software and the company can fix it. This little thing is a mercury arc lamp, and it is designed for ultraviolet sterilization applications. We already know that the TLM2 spectrometer is not capable of resolving the ultraviolet lines that exist in the UVB and UVC bands, but hopefully it will be able to capture the UVA parts of the spectrum. The glow from these little mercury arc lamps is rather beautiful, but it really should not be viewed with the naked eye. The ultraviolet radiation this thing emits can be quite damaging to the eyesight, so my human assistant is wearing protective goggles. One use of a spectrometer like this is to identify ionized gases from their spectral emissions. As well as containing mercury, this tube will also have a gas included to help with the startup process. We are going to try and identify that gas from its spectral emissions. Immediately, it becomes quite obvious that we have captured the main visible lines of mercury, as well as the UVA peak. In fact, all of these lines are shown to be within 1 nanometer of their published reference wavelengths, which is pretty damn good. And then, there are these other lines that were captured. Looking through some reference spectra, we can see that these lines are a very close match for those of argon. Identifying elements is a very useful application of these kinds of instruments. We made a video all about doing exactly that, and it is linked in the description below. We are going to try and measure the spectrum of a candle flame. It doesn't actually produce a lot of light, and we don't really want this spectrometer to get too close to a source of fire. So, instead of taking the spectrometer to the fire, we figured we would bring the candle light to the spectrometer, using this lens. We designed a lens mount that could work with both this spectrometer, and the Little Garden one as well. And with the magic of 3D printing, we have a completed lens assembly for our spectroscopy experiments. So let's get on and measure the light from this candle. We are using special science-grade blue tack to attach the spectrometer to the lens assembly. Obviously, it is important that for such serious science experiments, we only use the very best possible equipment. We are expecting this source to emit an almost perfect black body radiation spectrum. Let's see what the TLM2 spectrometer makes of this candlelight. Once again, we get the artifact. What the bloody hell is going on with this spectrometer? Well, we contacted the company and asked them, and they confirmed that this is a bug in their spectral inversion algorithm. They also told us that it has been fixed on their more expensive models. When we pushed for an answer to when it would be also fixed on the TLM2, we were met with a deafening silence. That doesn't sound terribly positive, does it? This is one of those rather cheap, but fun novelty lights, that has a white LED combined with a red laser and an ultraviolet LED. Best of all, it only cost about $1.50. Here, we can see the UV LED in operation. When we look at the spectrometer, we see that this isn't much of a UV source, but it does have just about enough ultraviolet radiation to allow you to see the security markings on banknotes. I guess this is probably the most useful function of this little device. If we activate the white LED, we can see that the spectrum is totally dominated by the fundamental 450 nanometer LED. This is a very cheap LED, so the fluorescent coatings have been minimized to keep the brightness as high as possible. And finally, there is a red laser. This is a basic diode laser with a power output of less than 1 milliwatt, and we have confirmed that power output level. You can see more about how we did this in this video, which is linked in the description below. So yes, as a light source, this is a pretty cheap and nasty toy. But, when you look at the interesting spectral content that this little thing can actually create, it seems to offer a lot of bang for your buck. Here, we are going to measure the spectral content of 3 different types of common flashlights. This one is the ubiquitous white LED type. It is actually just a 450 nanometer LED, with a special fluorescent coating that emits other colors to give the effect of a white light. This one is an infrared LED flashlight. We have used this in a number of projects, including this infrared chroma key camera system. And then, we have an ultraviolet flashlight, which again is an LED type. This one appears to have a filter over the front of the unit, so we suspect that the raw LED output has a lot of energy spilling over into the visible part of the spectrum. What is interesting about the spectrum of most general-purpose white LED flashlights is just how much of the fundamental 450 nanometer light is allowed to pass the fluorescent coating. This is generally done to improve the overall optical efficiency of these low-cost products. It's a competitive market, and the products that can claim the brightest output can achieve better sales. If we look at this spectrum of the infrared flashlight, first of all we can see that the peak is centered on 850 nanometers, and secondly, we can see a complete absence of the dreaded infrared catastrophe. This ultraviolet flashlight has an output that is centered on 365 nanometers, and is the most common type available. It should be noted that there is a little breakthrough in the infrared of higher order diffraction lines. This is a common issue with spectrometers like this. We thought it would be fun to see what happens when we combine all 3 of these flashlights. What we got was a surprise. What we can see is a very unstable spectral plot, constantly changing its proportions. We suspect that this is yet another bug in the algorithm. This is a small halogen incandescent lamp, and we are expecting a basic black body radiation emission from this bulb. As soon as we power up this bulb, we can immediately see that we have a reoccurrence of the bloody artifact. This is the 3rd time we have encountered this issue, and in each case, it happens when trying to measure a black body type light source. Now, I know that the team at the company, Torchbearer, are fairly young in age, and might have never encountered incandescent light bulbs in their everyday lives, but I'm pretty sure that they have heard of something called fire. The fact that this product got released with this bug is actually pretty shocking. This is easily the most difficult teardown we have ever attempted on this channel. Apart from the two screws that hold the cosine correction filter in place, everything is glued together, and the plastic enclosure is very thick. This is the one occasion that we wished that the manufacturer had used a less robust enclosure. Once the cosine correction filter is removed, we can get to work cutting this device open. Here, you can see the optical slit underneath the cosine filter. It's a shame to do this, but it is all for a good cause. So, let's cut this enclosure open with a hacksaw and take a look inside. Once the enclosure was cut in half, it became painfully obvious that we had a lot more work to do to get this thing fully disassembled. Here, you can see that the PCB has a single connector for all of the electrical signals that go to and from the optics module. Even with the PCB cut away, it took a lot of work to remove the rest of this plastic housing. The manufacturers had used thermally conductive adhesive on the upper side of the board. Finally, we had removed all of the plastic enclosure from the PCB. So now we decided that it might be a good idea to see if the product still worked. We reconnected the PCB to the optics module and then gave it a crude test. It seems that the PCB managed to survive our rather horrible abuse. Now it is time to attack that optics module. This had a double layer enclosure, so once again the hacksaw was needed to help to encourage this thing to open up. Here you can see the diffraction grating. It is a first surface reflective type. Even in this state of disassembly, the device still is operable. Here you can see that as the angle to the diffraction grating is changed, the whole curve moves up and down the spectral plot. Okay, let's take a look at what is on this PCB, starting with the top side. This is the MCU. It's a pretty heavyweight M4 Cortex, with floating point extensions and lots of peripherals. I guess that this shows us that the signal processing for this spectrometer is fairly substantial, and necessitates an investment in this chunky processing platform. Here we have the main voltage regulator for the device. And these are some more voltage regulators that generate the various voltages that the camera module needs. Here is something very strange. The product ships with a cable that has a USB to UART converter built into it, but here on the PCB is a location for exactly the same component, but it has not been populated. The transmit and receive lines have a build option that allows them to bypass this chip if it is not fitted. However, what is even more strange is that the MCU itself has a USB interface built in. We suspect that their software engineers did not have enough experience with the USB parts of the SDK to take advantage of this hardware shortcut. But why they didn't put the external USB to UART converter onto the PCB is a little bizarre. Taking a little look at the rear of the PCB, we can see that the workload of this MCU is not insubstantial. The fact that they have the need to add 1 MB of fast SRAM is testament to how busy this MCU actually is. This is the connector between the PCB and the optical module. These are some mystery buttons. We have tried to see what they do, and the results were that they appear to do absolutely bugger all. And finally, this is the USB connector. The company has used an older, mini USB connector, probably because very few people have this type of cable kicking around, and so are less likely to try and directly connect it to a USB port on a computer. Or, maybe they just didn't give a damn about what anybody thought, and just used an older connector because it was 2 cents cheaper. We were wondering about the diffraction grating inside this little spectrometer, and how many lines per millimeter it had. So we ran a little experiment to try and measure it. We are using a simple measurement of the higher order diffraction of this grating, and using a laser pointer to generate these aliased images. Using some simple math, we got a figure of about 960 lines per millimeter. Later we asked the company about this and they confirmed that it is actually 900 lines. So, our measurement wasn't that accurate, but at least it was in the same ballpark. This is the camera module from the spectrometer, and it is within this component that the quantum technology has been applied. We are going to crack this open, and take a look inside. Looking under a magnifying glass, we can see that the only active component is the CMOS imager die, the other small components are just passives. We then took a look, using a bench magnifier, hoping to learn some interesting details about this CMOS sensor. The company told us that it is a custom modified chip, that instead of the Bayer filter, it has the 20 different types of quantum dots, deposited directly onto the sensor. So, we took a look using our best microscope, hoping to see if we can capture some images of these quantum dots. In the end, we weren't able to see anything beyond what we would expect from the pixels. Later the company explained that these quantum dots are deposited with a thickness of just a few nanometers, and that our quest to view them was doomed from the start. And that concludes the teardown of the TLM2 Micro-Spectrometer. One of our main complaints about this product is that for this lower cost model, there is no data export feature. So, we thought we would try and do something about that. One of the strange things about this product is that the USB connector is being used to transmit serial UART data. And this gives us an opportunity to jailbreak the product. We made a little breakout board, so we can access the UART pins. And this will go in line with the supplied cable to the product. And then we added a little UART to USB converter, so we can listen into the data that is being sent to and from the device. The data is being transmitted at 115.2 kilobits per second. The next task was to figure out the packet structure and command list that is used for this device's communication protocol. With a little testing of the product, using a few different light sources and capturing the data, we were mostly able to figure out the basic structure of the data. There is no formal encryption protocols being used, but there is some data obfuscation being employed. This is using 16-bit session keys that are used to apply an exclusive OR to the spectral data. As of the time of making this video, we haven't figured out how the two session keys are generated, but it's pretty simple to brute force these keys, and only requires one iteration per bit. So, here is a couple of examples that we captured, and managed to extract the spectral data from. This is the captured spectrum from an ultraviolet flashlight, and as you can see, it also agrees with the data that is displayed in the product's application. And then we have the captured spectrum from the white flashlight. Again, we get a good match with the data that the app displays. If anyone is interested in creating an application for this product, one that enables data exporting, and perhaps some other features, we are more than willing to share what we have found so far. But before emailing us, please be aware that time is a precious commodity, and always in limited supply. So, if you are both serious and capable, then feel free to drop us an email. The address is on the channel page description. We feel that the company's decision to not include basic data export was a result of short-term thinking, but hopefully we have shown that there are options for bypassing these limitations. there aren't many tools that I feel it is useful, or even convenient to carry around on a daily basis. But, in my human assistant's laptop bag, there are the following items. A flashlight, which is always a very useful thing to have. There is also a gamma-ray spectrometer, in this case a Radiacode 102. And then, there is a compact USB thermal camera, which plugs into a smartphone. Again, small and very useful. And finally, we have the little TLM2 spectrometer. As we have seen, it is far from perfect, it has a lot of limitations, and all kinds of drawbacks. That said, it is the sheer portability and ease of use, that in the end, makes it useful. So, if it is just used for science on the go, or checking TFT displays in a television factory, we have personally found it to be very useful. And finally, it is available outside of mainland China, and can be bought on Amazon. We were somewhat shocked to see that the price is over double of that on Taobao, which is the Chinese equivalent of Amazon. But, there are a number of things to take into account. Firstly, the price has recently been increased on Taobao as well, but only by about 10%. Then we need to allow for shipping to the US, the cost that Amazon charges for its logistics, fulfillment and its commission. In addition to that, there is the cost of returns, which Amazon makes it far too easy to do, even when there is absolutely nothing wrong with the product. This cost also needs to be accounted for by the manufacturer. The manufacturer, Torchbearer, has also released a higher-end model onto Amazon. This one has Bluetooth connectivity, the bug in the spectral inversion algorithm has been fixed, and it allows the user to export spectral data directly. It costs significantly more than the TLM2, but has a slightly improved spectral resolution and range. Frankly, if this model had been available back when we purchased the TLM2, we would have stumped up the extra cash for this one instead. Just to be clear, we have never tested this new device, and so cannot really comment on either the performance or the quality. The only data that we have on this new product is what we can see online. Perhaps, one day we will review it, but there is just no way we are going to buy another spectrometer, when there are just so many other projects we are actively working on. Anyway, that's all we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed our little video, or at least found some parts of it interesting. If you think we deserve it, then please feel free to give it a like. And you could always hit subscribe, if you want to see more content like this. In a change from our normal practice, we have enabled YouTube advertising. We are saving up for a camera. All of the photography you have seen in our videos, has been captured using a cell phone, the limitations of which, is starting to limit the kind of content we can produce. We wish to express our sincerest gratitude to the following viewers, for their donations towards our camera fund. This is still a hobby channel, so we can say what we want, and YouTube's algorithm can go and get f***ed. Thank you for your time.
Danger. The emergency disrupt system is now activated. The ship will detonate in T-minus 30 seconds.
You now have only a very short time to choose the next video to watch.